roll the same.
Mr. Sibley. Mr. Moore.
I'm present.
Mr. Clemens.
Present.
Ms. Pat. Mr. Hull.
Here.
Mr. Howes.
Here.
Mr. Harrell. Mr. McMorris.
Here.
Ms. Carroll. Here. Mr. Alphonse. Is that the right way to say it?
Alphonse.
Alphonse.
Let's go to the
All right, going, coming through, any old business that we need to discuss tonight?
I would like to bring up something. I would like for our committee to get a copy of the engineering report for the Gapping project,
For what?
for the Gapping 22 Highway Gapping project, so we can better understand the plan.
Who's done work on that, do you know?
I would assume we would make a request to the parish president's office.
I think that's already done and gone, Mr. Ladd. There's no stopping it now.
Yes, sir, Mr. Randall.
Yes. To fill in the gaps of what he's talking about, that is what Livingston Parish Council had voted on to remove the Sioux from Ascension Parish. I think it's, Mr. Holland probably knows exactly how much money, but I think it was like $42 million or something, the project. And it's going to raise Highway 22. We have spoke about that numerous times to allow Ascension to add additional pumps and pump water underneath Highway 22. And that's basically what he's asking. He wants to see the engineer. Most people think that the Diversion Canal is the dividing line between Ascension and Livingston Parish, and it's not. It's by Pierre. So in and out of that, some of that property could be in Livingston, some of it could be in Ascension. I'm assuming that's his concern.
I'd like to know where they're proposing to cut the gaps in Highway 22. The engineers are saying that it's supposed to be a negative for us as far as flood waters.
Is that the parish engineers?
Yeah, well, it said Rick's Engineers. I'm looking at WAFB's report on it. They were interviewing Parish President Ricks on it, and he was saying the conclusion of flood risk would be mitigated for the Gapping project. And I was just wondering if we could get a look at the engineering study that did that they based that on. To me, it's not clear if, I'm assuming the study was done with the Laurel Ridge levee built, but I'm not certain of that. I would like to see the study.
Yeah, Mr. Ladd, you probably can help us with.
I can help. The way it was sold to the council was the modeling by those engineers that Mr. Hall is speaking about was done in conjunction with the commit diversion. That would be a negative impact is what they sold to the council if they put those two projects together. Meaning that you would get a relief somewhat from commit diversion, but then if you allowed Ascension to do the pump, and then that brought it back to even again to make it no negative and be about even like it currently is. The theory of that is might sound good, but there's a lot of people in Livingston Parish been paying taxes or millages on that commit diversion for a long time, and that was to get a benefit, not to be even. The other part of that is when they did the modeling, Ascension failed to disclose, or in my knowledge, they failed to disclose the wall they were building to wall off part of the Macaroon Swamp, which will tremendously affect Livingston Parish during storm surges. It will cut half that basin off. So he has a legitimate question and a legitimate...
What's the date on that report from WFB?
Let's see. March 23rd?
March?
March 23rd.
Mm-hmm. March 23rd.
When, Mr. Ladd? When was the lawsuit,
About two council
when was
meetings...
all that worked out, I guess?
No, two council meetings ago, the parish president came before the council and asked us to remove the lawsuit, saying that his engineers had looked over Ascension's claim that it would be no impact on us. And he said with the commit diversion project. So the stipulation is in this suit is that Ascension Parish is not supposed to do anything additional until the commit diversion is done. And that was a win-win situation for the parish. The part of that should be easy because the state's gonna take 2 to probably 4 years on the gapping project. So, but commit diversion, we don't know when that's gonna happen.
So, did we get any of our parish engineers to confirm?
Well,
Or we
according
just solely
to the
take
parish,
Ascension's?
according to the parish president, that was the information he brought to the council. Am I right, Shane?
So to reply to your request, we'll find out if we can set up a meeting and find out.
Get somebody.
A meeting or just the information, just the summary of the report would be fine.
Yes, sir.
Other old business is we talked about, going to talk about the CEA with the meeting with the council last time. We brought it up, and I think it was just thrown out the water. Did we get anywhere with that? Shane? Let you talk a little bit, Shane. I mean, basically, it's just like we just wasn't even there. So.
Well, I don't know if I'd go say that. I think it was a very important project that was, communicated. Shane Mack, 29863 Embets Road, Albany, Louisiana, Council District 9. Anyway, I've been thinking a lot about that. I read that cooperative and Beaver agreement, and I understand why there were some that didn't want to, I guess you could say, enter into that agreement. My thought is in some way, shape, or form, you kind of give away certain rights, authority, you put it in somebody else's hands, and you kind of give them the, I guess you could say, the authority, the rights to kind of negotiate and oversee a project and be your voice and your opinion, and I was speaking specifically about, the parish president and some of the mayors maybe didn't want to enter into that cooperative and Beaver agreement. But my message is that I communicated this actually to some parish representatives here just in the past week, that I do applaud this committee here for, in some way, shape, or form, working with the engineering firm from Brevard Drainage District 1 to I guess you could say, identify that project was a very, very important project, and that prioritizing that project is very, very, very important. And we was in the Master Planning Review Committee last night. There's a lot of positive talk and a lot of positive, I guess you could say, things in the works about the Juban North Extension project, and to me, the way that group was able to get a lot of folks, and it looks like that project is going to be moving forward and it's going to be funded in some way, shape, or form, was because the way they did that was they were able to work with, I guess you could say, other government entities and administrations, in a unified effort to communicate and kind of put that project together and to show everybody involved, parish as a whole, to the higher up elected officials that this was a project that everybody was in favor of and that everybody wanted to focus efforts on, because you can't do everything at once. So my thought is, is that to actually sign that cooperative and Beaver agreement, probably may not happen. I don't think that's going to happen, but I think that maybe you still could work together as a group with the folks that was involved in that project, and maybe the parish review engineers, and maybe even the parish president, and maybe the parish president and one of his administrative assistants, you know, and maybe some of the other mayors of like Denham Springs and Walker and in the community, such that you could still be the driving force behind a very important drainage improvement project for Livingston Parish, in the fact that you could do some type of drainage study, maybe clean out existing drainage, maybe develop some type of, I don't know, project to improve the drainage underneath the interstates, maybe add Florida Boulevard, maybe add Canadian National Railway, all of those transportation infrastructures run east and west, you know, and the water's flowing north and south, and it is very, very important that that project, you know, be implemented and constructed and whatever in a certain way, so that it doesn't have negative impact downstream, you know, but that it is a very, very, very positive impact, you know, and it doesn't have negative impact on the people upstream, you know. So I talked a whole lot about that, you know, but I don't want you to get discouraged in the fact that I think that it's a very, very good thing of this group to actually identify that was something that Livingston Parish and the citizens of Livingston Parish, you know, and more than likely a large portion, I can't speak for anybody else, you know, but a large portion of the mayors and you know, the elected officials of Livingston Parish, you know, would like to see happen in some way, shape, or form, get funded, kind of keep working on that to try to figure out, you know, and maybe it's just as simple as going and sitting down with the parish president and maybe with the mayors and saying, hey, you know, okay, so we don't want to sign this agreement, but we would like this project funded. We would like for you to push for this project. We think this is a very, very important project, and that, you know, I would attack it that way. Maybe get a resolution from the city of Walker, you know what I mean, and maybe get a letter from the mayor of Walker, you know, if they're in favor of improving drainage underneath the interstate in such a way that it doesn't have negative impact downstream, you know, my recommendation would be to maybe approach it like that, you know, but
So as a
I just wanted to
drainage-
speak on that, you know, that's how I kind of felt about that cooperative Beaver agreement, you know. So
as a drainage committee, us presenting it to the council that
yeah,
night,
yeah,
you know, it's kind of like we wasn't even heard. I mean, y'all heard us,
yeah,
but there wasn't any action taken.
yeah,
And, you know, as us as a community council up here, I mean,
Yeah.
we had a special meeting
Yeah.
to discuss this.
yeah,
And then to present it
yeah,
and not have any input at all from the council, I mean, that's very disheartening.
yeah, yeah, I understand your frustration there.
Oh.
Well, what I can say about that now, to let you know how I felt about that situation, you know, I'm on the church council at Bethlehem Baptist Church, and they have church council meetings on Wednesday night, and it happened to be previously the same Wednesday nights as these meetings, right? So it made it hard to come to this, you know, that's an important commitment that I like to participate in. They didn't have one tonight, to the best of my knowledge, so I came tonight, and I'm gonna, in some way, shape, or form, I don't even know if people know about it yet, but I'm gonna try to figure out a way to maybe switch that to another night, you know, if we can get the support of that group, you know, so that I can attend more of these drainage meetings. But what I'd like to say is, that was really, a day or two before that, maybe the same day of that council meeting, was when I found out about that cooperative endeavor agreement, you know, and to me, as an elected official, and for whatever reasons, I'm not blaming anybody, I'm not blaming myself, and whatever, I'm just saying, when an elected official and when you're trying to, I guess, talk somebody into, you know, supporting something like that, I think you need to give it more time. You present that, right? Maybe you give it a couple, 2 or 3 weeks, you know, and kind of explain what it is, and then give people time to kind of focus on, you know, a downstream effect or and that type of stuff, you know. So that's I mean, I don't want you to get discouraged. I mean, I took it very, very serious. I listened to what you had to say. I'm telling you straightforward that was a very, very good project that you identified and that you would like to see happen. I think that you shouldn't drop it. I think you should continue to push for that, you know, and that type of thing. I also communicated that I understand why there were some that didn't want to sign that agreement, you know, because they want to, not give up their, in my opinion, I didn't speak to them about this, I could just, after I read the thing, you know, I could see where, you know, it's kind of hard sometimes to, I mean, basically that cooperative endeavor agreement, you know, I'm sure you understand exactly what that means, you know, a lot of y'all do, but I mean, basically you're saying, okay, you can go communicate for me and everything that you say is, I'm good with it, you know, and you gotta kind of be, in my opinion, be careful with some of that, you know, because you may not always agree exactly, you know, to that. And I know it was for that specific project, but that's how I kind of felt like that.
But
about
for
that,
us, you know,
so-
coming for the council, we don't have any legs without the council. So, I mean, we, like, kind of our legs chopped off,
Yeah, yeah,
and that's kind of where we're at.
yeah. Well, I mean, I don't want to talk all night, you know, there's a lot of important people here that like to talk, but I mean, let me just go ahead
I'm
and
not
say a few
picking on
things,
you, I know,
okay? So,
I'm just telling
let me
you.
just go ahead and say a few things, okay? So, I think this is a very, very important group, you know? I think that, the responsibility, you know, it's very, very important. I do think that in some way, shape, or form, you can set some goals, and I think that you can accomplish those goals, you know, because I know that, you know, of course, Randy supports you. I support you. I think that majority of the Livingston Parish Council supports you, you know, and I think that the Livingston Parish Council can pass resolutions after you identify what projects and maybe, you know, how you'd like to improve drainage. And then we work together as a group, you know, to go communicate to higher elected officials, you know, parish president and folks like that, you know, to get these projects funded in whatever means possible, you know. An example was kind of like Master Planning Committee, you know, and this Jubin Road North extension project, you know. I mean, they were a huge part of communicating with higher up elected officials, identifying a priority list that everyone could get behind, and I credit them for a lot of the success for that project. So I mean, I don't know how else to say. I mean, I wouldn't be that discouraged. I mean, to me, it's a good project that you identified. I would really like to see it happen. I've been wanting that to happen ever since I was a elected councilman. So my suggestion would be to develop a list of drainage improvement projects that this group feels that would, you know, help a mass majority of the people in Livingston Parish. And then I would say prioritize that list, you know, because you can't fund everything at once, and maybe come up with a way to communicate and push and get support, you know, and try to fix some drainage problems that way, you know. And I'll just go ahead and say this too, you know, so it's a very sophisticated problem. The drainage in Livingston Parish and improvements is a very, very, very sophisticated problem. You know, you've probably already are aware, but I'll just go ahead and say it, you know. My personal opinion, maybe not the rest of the world, and probably not a lot of you that live inside a funded gravity drainage district, but my personal opinion, one of the biggest mistakes Livingston Parish ever made, way back when I was probably too young to think about it, is they formed these individual gravity drainage districts over on the west side of the parish, okay? And those got funded. And once they're funded and they're established and they're doing good things, it's kind of hard to change that. And it's kind of hard to, I mean, why would you want to change a good thing, right? But the biggest problem is you have 80% of Livingston Parish that's in an unfunded gravity drainage district that has no funding and no way to implement drainage improvement projects or to maintain off-road drainage and all these different things, right? So it's kind of a major problem, right? Because to me, you need a gravity drainage district all over Livingston Parish, right? Such that you can implement drainage improvement projects and maintain drainage systems and all these wonderful things that need to happen, okay? And you really can't do that. And some of the reasons why you can't do that is there's a lot of folks that live in those in that unfunded gravity drainage district area that think that maybe there's funds that already exist and that the parish itself, the parish president and the Department of Public Works should handle a lot of that drainage, off-road drainage improvements, right? But there's no the taxes that fund the Department of Public Works, the way they're written, they, it's not for that purpose. And I think that every taxpaying citizen, wants all tax money, you know, to go for its intended purpose, you know. So that's a struggle in itself, trying to get the parish with non-dedicated funds to fix drainage problems in 80% of Livingston Parish, and then you have 3 funded gravity drainage districts over here with, I guess you could say, board members with their own individual, I guess you could say, plans and crews to fix the drainage over there. And you probably know, and I think you've learned since you've been a part of this committee, that it's kind of hard to get things done when you've got so many people on a different page, you know. So, like I say, I don't want to talk all night, but there's a long-term game plan. I mean, I don't mind talking all night, but I don't want to.
We gather how all that
I mean,
works.
if you want to ask some questions, but the game plan.
We gather how that works.
Yeah, the game plan is we formed Gravity Drainage District 8, right? And the board members are going to be some of the councilmen, and that's going to make up 80% of Livingston Parish, and we're going to get that funded here over the next year or so. And once that happens, you know, we'll have dedicated funding and dedicated resources to listen to your ideas and to some way, shape, or form fund those drainage improvement projects, you know. And then long term, you know, this could be the beginning of a consolidated gravity drainage district for all of Livingston Parish, so that resources could be consolidated, you know, and
So in the interim-
so that you have one group.
In the interim, they got this money that's coming. So,
You're talking about this Watershed project stuff that this
Yeah.
nice lady
Yes.
or gentleman's going to talk
So-
about tonight?
and look, it's not like I mean, it's a good chunk of money that's gonna help our whole parish.
Yes, sir.
So, I mean, we all understand where you're at, and I'm not trying to cut you short, but
Yeah,
we know
yeah.
where you're at.
Well,
You got something, Mr. House?
Yeah, I got something.
Go ahead.
I mean, we're chasing this money, but everybody keeps talking about just, I mean, the funding we got so far, other than the 42 million for the gapping,
Yep.
but 15 million that they got, or whatever it was, that's strictly nothing what we've been doing, cleaning and dredging, cleaning and stripping, keep flowing what we got flowing. That's what the drainage departments do. Now, they just keep, there's no money in the drainage districts, the ones incorporated districts, to even make any new canals or anything, because we can't pay mitigation. So, all they're doing is keeping clean what they can keep clean to flow at the best they can flow every day for the rains. What we need to get from the watershed is some new, bigger canals. We need some major benefits. We don't need cleaning ditches and that. We need something. Everybody knows we flood every time it rains. We don't need somebody to tell us it floods every time it rains. We need somebody to widen ditches or at least clean the banks where they clean down here on West Coyell, which is our district, incorporated district. They come up it 2 weeks later, trees fell back on it because we can't clean the side of the bank. So we're
Yeah.
right back, in 2 weeks, we're right back to where we were before they started. So until somebody changes how it's written and what we can do, we have to look at major projects, not these little cleaning. 15 million is nothing in a major scheme of anything on cleaning ditches. So that's the.
Shane,
You know, I'm not going to argue with that, but go ahead, you talk.
I think what he's saying, that the biggest problem that the drainage districts have
Mhm.
with these waterways is the Army Corps of Engineers.
Yeah.
And that's the bottom line. And if we want to do something cohesive, we need to have a parish-wide addressing of the Army Corps of Engineers for an individual project. We need to have a dedicated person that's going to work with them every day. At this point in time, to my knowledge, the Corps of Engineers isn't even accepting applications for any work. They tell you, don't even send it to us. And it's been going on for some time.
Well, you know, go ahead. It goes back to this. Okay, so you've identified this problem, and I'm not quite sure if that's a real problem or not, but I trust you to believe what you're saying. So, how I would attack that situation, you know, I would some way in shape or form communicate those things that you're communicating that you feel that needs to happen, right? My first thought would be, okay, how do you know that that's what needs to be done? You think
So I
that,
work with it every day.
you just been living here for a while, but how can you, it's not quite enough to go get $100 million and put to where what you're saying. To me, what I would like to see this group in some way, shape, or form is to work on some type of master gravity drainage plan, you know, where there's some type of drainage study projects, you know, that kind of measures and calculates flows and measures capacities of the current existing drainage systems, such that you can kind of say, well, this is undersized, and it needs to be improved, and here's the study that went behind it, and here's the data, and here's the facts, and then you can go put a price on that project, right? And then you go implement that. You go ahead.
We can't get nobody to approve us somebody to pay to do that.
Say
Can
that
you
one more
get-
time. Okay, so
Can
let's
you
talk
get us
about
some
that.
funding
Okay, so let's talk
to pay
about that.
somebody to do that?
Okay, so let's talk about that. Okay, so
That's
real quick.
already done. I mean, how do they announce the river flood stage? They already know its capacities of carry. So that
That's-
information already exists.
Shane, point here,
Go ahead.
there is one study that has been funded already. Drainage District 2 is working on that right now. And that was brought about with the proposing of the Beaver Creek diversion.
Mm-hmm.
They need to have a good count of how many cubic feet, how many feet per second,
Mm-hmm.
where from, and it's basically a watershed study. But that was recently commissioned. I think District 1 also has one of those under works.
And we got.
I would
we got-
imagine.
We got lots of stuff.
I would imagine those funded gravity drainage districts do have some type of drainage plan with, you know, calculated,
But that's folded
you know,
into
stormwater
$16
drainage
million.
and all that type of stuff, you know, and so that they can go after projects with data and get the funding and put the project in place. So, but getting back to what I was gonna say is, you know, I don't wanna put ideas in your head. I mean, you know probably as much about Livingston Parish drainage as me. But I know in order to me get a group of individuals behind a project, right? You're gonna need some data, and you're gonna need some, you know, you're gonna need to prove that this is what happens. And to me,
But the
you need to
data's
get a
already
united
out.
effort.
Data's out. Everything's, I mean, we got years of data.
Yeah.
I mean, we don't need to do any new studies.
Okay, so let's start talking about some of that data. I mean, I'm not quite sure exactly what data you're talking about. What are you referring to? So let's start talking about some of that.
I mean, Beaver Creek diversion. I mean, we got
Okay, so
policy-
Beaver Creek diversion.
we
Okay,
got
where we at?
policy
Where are we on
charities.
that specific project? And is that a project that a large united group of Livingston Parish citizens feels like that should be a high priority?
I'd say the council.
It was been recently funded, and it hasn't been done yet. The last study that I'm aware of was 2000.
Okay, so here we go. So he's sitting here communicating that there was a drainage impact study or some type of study performed, and the data showed that that's what needed to happen. And in some way, shape, or form, they communicated with their elected officials, and they got that project funded, from what I'm hearing him say. So to me, that's how you do this type of stuff.
But we have them, they got them, Drainage One's got them, but they all stop and get the mitigation because nobody can afford the $71 million to pay mitigation. We got a $500,000 project with $51 million
Well,
in mitigation.
I don't want to stand here and claim to know or have all the answers, but what I can tell you is this. I hate to speak for somebody else, but what I can tell you about my experiences with this particular elected official, and that's Garrett Graves, he will listen to you. Him and his organization will listen to you. And if you feel like the Corps of Engineers is the problem, he will go to him and his group will go to bat for you. And in some way, shape, or form, the right thing will happen, whether who's right or who's wrong. And I feel like don't let that type of stuff discourage you or stop you. If you really want to work to improve, you know, identify what you really feel like is important, you know, and communicate that, and then continue to push and work on that. I'm having a hard time sitting here believing that, you know, we can't implement drainage improvement projects because the Corps of Engineers won't let us do it. I mean, I know that they have a list of rules and they have a list of regulations, and I think that we need to follow in some way, shape, or form, you know, but I don't think they're here to prevent you from accomplishing the things that you've identified that will help Livingston Parish drainage systems.
Ascension Parish has connections with the Corps of Engineers. They have somebody over there that gets all of their permits. They don't have to do all the fighting that all we hear is they won't do anything. Who is trying to do this?
It's a very,
Nobody's trying, they wanna do study. How many of y'all get these flyers in the mail from Gary Graves and everybody, how much money we get to do all these projects? Have y'all ever seen any of them done? No. They got money to build the Weir back on the Diversion Canal over there. They studied it, and where the heck did the money go? It didn't go anywhere.
let's talk about that Weir project, you know, and I don't have all the answers for that because I think that a parish official like Leighton Ricks has the answers, or someone within his organization does have the answers. But what I can tell you about that Weir project that I know
Well, I know a lot about the Weir
is
project, too.
that project is on the Watershed list, right? The Watershed funding project?
No, sir.
Yes, sir.
Well, there's a government grant, okay? And from what I understand, that project is funded, and that is going to happen. Now that happens to be that's all recent stuff, you know. After the parish review engineer, you know, Fortin DeBlata and that group, you know, in Leighton and Mark Harold's group, did push for that project in some way, shape, or form. That project, the study was done. It was the data was there that it would benefit, and from what I understand, that project is funded, and it's just a matter of time before the construction.
It's funny, but they're having a problem deciding where they're gonna pull the rocks through, if it's gonna affect the lower part of the river, just like they having problems with the bridge in front of Summit, getting all the stuff up there. They can't hurt the river a lot. The river's been hurt for the last 40 years down there.
So look, I'm gonna move this along.
Yeah,
I'm gonna move this along a little bit. We got a guest speaker here.
Yeah.
And I don't wanna have them sit here.
and I'm willing to stay late if you want to talk more about this type of stuff. But
Thanks for your time, Shane.
yeah.
All right, does that conclude all of our old business?
Pretty much.
Moving on to new business. So, we have a presentation from, the Regional Watershed Coordinator, Ms. Rachel Sanderson. Rochelle, I'm sorry.
I'm gonna have, my colleagues Evan Kimbo as well as Pat Forbes, come up with me. I'm gonna pass these packets around for y'all and make sure that you have some materials. Thank you.
Thank you.
We need to re-announce y'all's names at the podium, so in case y'all might.
Yes.
Thank you.
Yeah.
We'll come up one at a time. So I'm Rachel Sanderson. To be very clear, I'm not a resident of Livingston Parish. I live about 15 minutes to the east in Pumpkin Center, so not too far. And I'm also the Region 7 Watershed Coordinator. I work at Capital Region Planning Commission. I'll let my colleagues introduce themselves as well.
Hi y'all, thanks so much for having us. I'm Evelyn Campo with the Office of Community Development. I'm also not a resident of the parish, but so happy to be with you guys. And I'm on the state side, so kind of Rachel's counterpart, but from the OCD side. And so I work with her region, Region 7, as well as the other regions in the state.
I'm Pat Forbes with Louisiana Office of Community Development. We're one of 5 agencies in the Watershed Council that the governor created, and we were the chair of the council for the first couple of years. CPRA is actually the chair at this point.
I'm going to keep them up front with me because I know there's going to be questions about projects. OCD is definitely the folks who are going to be able to answer those, especially as we are still in the round 1 process. And as you can understand, that is a process that is a competitive process, so the amount of information that can be shared is going to be dictated strictly by OCD as they go through that process. So you have a packet in front of you that has quite a few materials. All of those materials can also be found online, so at watershed.la.gov as well. And then also, if you're having trouble finding them, please feel free to reach out to me. But really, what I wanted to do was be able to provide y'all with an overview of LWI and really where we're at in terms of Region 7, give you background on kind of how we got here to this moment in time, some opportunities that we could have for y'all to provide feedback, and then I'm also going to toss it over to my friends and colleagues at the state to be able to talk more about the projects as well. So essentially, to make a really long thing short, we know we're 5 years from the floods of 2016. That is the initial idea and brain starter for the Watershed Initiative. In that particular year, we had significant flood loss across the entire state. I think it was about 56 of 64 parishes across Louisiana had a federally declared disaster because of flooding. So a couple years following that, Governor John Bell Edwards at that point in time said, we really need to act on this. We need to do something. We cannot continue to have our citizens be subjected to this level of flood risk over time. So from there, he set up the Council on Watershed Management, which includes 5 state agencies. So one of those is Office of Community Development, as we know, so they're our local constituent for HUD. They essentially manage all of our community development block grant dollars. CPRA, Coastal Protection and Restoration Authority, everything and anything coastal in the Coastal Master Plan, that is their realm of responsibility within flood risk and mitigation. Louisiana Department of Wildlife and Fisheries, they have the Scenic Rivers Program. Department of Transportation Development, which has the Floodplain Management Program, and then also Governor's Office of Homeland Security and Emergency Preparedness, so anything hazard mitigation. So he said, you 5 state agencies all have a role in flood mitigation. We need you to work together. We need some programmatic as well as policy alignment, which I think some folks, based on discussions I've been hearing, having alignment sounds like something that could be a good thing for the benefit of citizens in Livingston Parish as well as across the state. As a part of that work, there was a Phase 1 report that was developed. Essentially, that report was to outline kind of what are some activities and steps forward that the state should take to be able to find consistency in programs as well as policy alignment around floodplain management, mitigation, watershed activities over time. One of those elements that were identified is the fact, and y'all are not strangers to this, the authority to be able to make decisions around land use, planning, development, decisions of that nature. It's housed at the local level, right? And that makes a lot of sense. Also, maybe it doesn't make as much sense for the state to come in and be able to dictate what those decisions are. So what if there was actually a regional entity that could actually be there as a coordinating entity amongst all of those different parishes? So this is where the regional paradigm comes in. Essentially, the state set up 8 different watershed regions. So in your packet, you'll notice that there's a map in here specifically on the left-hand side. If you pull it out, these are the 8 different watersheds across the state. These watersheds were actually, or these watershed regions were defined based on different hydrologic unit codes. Essentially what a hydrologic unit code is a unit that is used by USGS, United States Geological Survey, to determine survey boundaries for watersheds. They have different scales. So if you think of the stacking Russian dolls, the biggest one is considered a Huck 2, and that's the entire lower Mississippi River Basin, St. Louis all the way down to Louisiana, essentially. They were mostly based on Huck 8s and Huck 6s, which are much smaller watersheds. So that's how those regions were defined, essentially. So Region 7, as well as the other watershed regions, were supposed to stand up in March of last year. As we know, that timeline was pushed back just a little bit, right? We were trying to deal with how we figure out living with a global pandemic, as well as many, many other things that were happening at that moment in time. So those regional steering committees didn't actually really get stood up until about May. So they've been really in operation for a year now, which is kind of hard to believe. So Livingston does have a steering committee member, that is Steve Kistler. The alternate is Mark Harrell. So they've been participating in those conversations. I would say more so Steve, whenever he can be there. He's been contributing to the conversations. We also have 1 steering committee member from each parish that's represented. So there's 13 parishes across Region 7 in particular. We also have 3 regional representatives. 1 is with the Amite River Basin Commission, specifically the executive director. We also have a representative with Pontchartrain Conservancy. His background is more on water quality and thinking about the Pontchartrain Basin, because most of the watersheds within Region 7 are coastal. They're linear. They flow north-south into Pontchartrain Basin. And then we also have Karen Zito, who is with the Greater Baton Rouge Home Builders Association. And if you want the full list of members, that's all on CRPC's website. If you have trouble finding it, email me, and I will definitely get that to you. So the purpose of those regional steering committees that I mentioned, they're meant to serve really guiding, acting as guideposts, acting as advisors for 2 specific things. So everybody across the state in each of the regions, we all have a regional steering committee. The first order of business that they have to take care of over this year-long period is to actually outline a regional provisional governance recommendation. So if you look on the left-hand side of your packet, it's this very last attachment that's in here. This is one of those opportunities for feedback. So the reason why we have this document is because it's been recommended that essentially there should be a regional watershed entity. And that entity should have activities that it is doing that is in support and to the benefit of existing activities across the region. We're not talking additional regulatory authority or anything of that nature here, but an entity that can actually provide support for technical assistance in terms of the best data, modeling, information, resources, being able to get connected with other funding resources and mechanisms, and being able to create consistency across the region. We can get a little bit more into that, but I don't want to spend the whole time talking. I know that we want to talk projects too. So that's the first order of business with those steering committees. Where we're at with that right now is that steering committee voted on that recommendation at the end of January. We're collecting feedback all the way up until, I would say probably really mid-June. By the end of June, the steering committee is actually going to have to make a decision on incorporating recommendations for that feedback into a more finalized document. I say more finalized because it's still not the finalized version. There's 8 of these across the state, and our friends at OCD have the tremendous privilege of being able to figure out how they take all 8 of those recommendations and then move on them as a state. So we're really supportive of that effort, and it's going to be a really interesting one, I think. So we are in a period that I think is really exciting for the state of Louisiana and Region 7 in general. Second of order of business that steering committee is going to have to act on is, I think we've all heard about the round 1 projects, which are separate from the state projects, right? The state projects buckets, those were existing projects that were on the state agencies' dockets. Those 5 agencies that I mentioned, these are projects that have already kind of been in the works, on the books, and associated with those 5 state agencies. That was the announcement that was made sometime within the last six to 8 weeks or so. Round 1 specifically, that is a competitive process that folks had to enter into. So within that process, the state's Office of Community Development, along with some advisors from their partners, are selecting about $60 million worth of projects across the whole state. So it's a statewide competitive pool or bucket. And then each region gets about $5 million to select projects with. So the steering committee in particular has voted that we're going to use the state's process to be able to determine which projects will be selected. So the projects that score the highest in terms of criteria and the evaluation criteria that are listed online, whatever those are at the regional level that also meet the other stipulations, like less than $5 million, for example, then those are the projects that are going to be funded at the regional level. I'm going to pause here, and I'm going to let either Evelyn or Pat come in and speak a little bit more to project items. And we can also pause here if we have questions. I saw Mayor McCarroll, you looked like you were about to speak, maybe.
There's just $5 million for Livingston. That's not a lot of money.
It's for all 13 parishes. So it's an exercise in coordination. I think we recognize that it's not a significant amount of funding for this first initial round. But I think I'm going to let Pat or Evelyn speak a little bit more to what we could see in the future.
You just brought up 15 million for something, and I was surprised at 5 million.
Yeah, I mean, absolutely. And the full list of state-funded projects that I mentioned, the ones that are more the state agency side, actually Livingston did the best across the whole state.
Oh.
So there was about 50, I think almost a third of the funds are to the benefit of Livingston Parish. So just know that y'all are in a better boat, if you will, pun intended, than other places across the state.
Are we talking about just the first phase, is that correct? When you're speaking on, talking about the first phase, gravel, right?
And how many rounds are there? How many rounds are there?
So, sorry, Pat Forbes. Yeah, so you're right, $5 million is not much. And to be honest, $1.2 billion is not much for the whole state if we think about all the flood risk that we face as a state, right? So the primary objective of spending the $1.2 billion in this first $100 million is just the start, is to get us in the mode of working together in these regional watershed groups so that we make the best investment, so that we pool our resources, so that we don't do projects that hurt each other instead of helping each other. To Rachel's point earlier, it's really, we know the 1.2 billion isn't enough, but what we hope it's enough to do is get us a structure in place so that we're all doing smart stuff all the time. It means having models and data that you can work with. In fact, the Amite River Basin is already modeled, and y'all have had the advantage of that in some of these projects that you're talking about. But you're right, $5 million isn't much.
And if we've got 30% of the funds, I thank you whoever did that.
So that's in the state projects, and we'll, I'm gonna let Evelyn, I guess, talk about the two different buckets, but, the main thing to remember is that this is just the beginning. While the governor said, yes, we've got to change the way fundamentally that we address flood risk in the state, we also have to go do some things that give people confidence that we're reducing flood risk right now. And that's this over $250 million that's getting invested, but there's another 600 million or more yet to be invested in rounds 2 and 3 that will come over the next 10 years.
10 years.
Yes, ma'am.
Thanks so much, y'all. Just one thing I want to kind of add to all the great points that our group has made. I think one important thing to keep in mind for you all specifically, because I hear a lot of really good points in this room, clearly, like, these need to be heard, not just by those of us who may agree, right, but like a wider group. Often we have to make our case to, you know, the Corps, or, you know, a funding source or another entity to get behind the projects that we see as necessary in an area. And so I would just put to y'all that this regional steering committee that we're all participating in, and Rachel has been very effective in facilitating these meetings, even in a virtual environment. That is a space where you can have coordination with other parishes and other entities that can bolster your argument for what you need here. And I think that's a huge strength that you can use to your advantage, is, you know, realize, and I know y'all do, you're not alone in this. You have allies, and when you band together, maybe the Corps is more likely to listen, or maybe you're more likely to make your case to that group that's potentially funding competitive projects, or even coordinate with some of your neighbors to the north, right? Because some of our flooding problems don't start in the parish that we're in, right? They start elsewhere, as Pat was saying. And so I'll just put to y'all, that's a huge opportunity here.
So it's kind of like a cooperative endeavor.
Well, I would say that it is a collective group. So it's not necessarily contracts, right? We're talking about, as Pat was saying, we can be smarter
But it's
if we
people,
work
it's
together.
different entities working with each other. It's not fighting each other all the time.
Well, that's the goal, right? Not fighting each other all the time, but realizing that if we're doing something that is duplicating what someone else is doing, maybe we can rethink that and
Right.
spend our money together, right, in a better way. And exactly like I'm hearing y'all say too, in some cases, large-scale projects are needed, and we can't do that alone. And that's what we're all realizing. So thank you guys so much. If y'all have any questions, that's what we're here for.
I got one.
Mr. House?
My first question is, can watershed money be used for mitigation,
For flood mitigation?
for land mitigation to do projects?
Oh, mitigation, like wetlands mitigation.
Yes.
So, and Pat, feel free to jump in, but I know that's a component of many projects that they have a mitigation requirement. My understanding is, you know, grant supply.
I'd say that a lot of the projects that will wind up being funded by Watershed Initiative are going to be mitigation projects in and of themselves, in the sense that there are lots of, and even the LA 22 project is a perfect example. It's going to replenish fresh water to a certain part of the swamp, and it may well be that you'll be able to earn wetland credits, mitigation credits, by virtue of spending that money. So what I don't know if it can be used to buy credits, but it may be able to. I'm not certain.
Which bank is that gonna be given to?
I'm sorry?
Which land bank would that be given to? Chris?
I don't know. I really don't know. The project sponsor is the Montclair Levy.
So they would
they'd
end up with-
probably be in charge of.
That's not coming to us either, so.
And as I understand it, they probably are
Mr.
meeting a
Delat.
great number of.
I'm going to ask this group a question, I guess. First, I want to make a statement. The water, the way the water flows to Livingston is above us, and then we have our own water we have to get rid of. So East Baton Rouge and Ascension puts a lot of water on Livingston. So that would be a project that you would want to benefit those two parishes along with the parish of Livingston. You would want to do one of those projects, is that correct, to qualify? You said,
So
someone said
I will-
earlier.
I will say the scoring on round one gives you more points if it has more entities that are benefiting from it.
So now that I've made that statement, this is what I'm gonna say. Every drop of water that flows through Livingston Parish, whether it comes from our parish, comes from our neighboring parishes, every drop of water has to go through the North Pass. The North Pass is currently 22 feet deep, which is plenty deep enough. Lake Maurepas is a 3 foot and maybe even less in most places. We got 2 projects that was talking, I was grilling Shane on earlier, 3 if you count the Weir. Those projects are not gonna benefit us from flood relief until we get a channel through Lake Maurepas to the Weir. I mean, to the pass, North Pass. And the reason is even if you made our rivers, which are silted up now, deeper, the elevation of the lake is still this high, and it's just coming here and bouncing back. And I live probably 2 miles from the lake, okay? Do we live that far? About 2 miles from the lake. And the water just circles around and comes back. The lake is actually a dam now. That's why the council had passed resolutions to see if we can get shell dredging back, which is looks like it's not gonna happen. But at least that would have been an income for the parish. That would also would allow competitive bidding where we wouldn't have to spend money, that would improve our drainage and give us a product we could sell and get taxes on. The reason I asked the question earlier, if this was scored, to me, that's a no-brainer, this project, and that would qualify for this watershed initiative. And then all the other things that we do as a drainage district or as public works department or as a parish, when we do open our ditches and our canals, it's a place for it to go instead of just sitting. And I'm not exaggerating. We had 48 hours of rain yesterday, and our flooding wasn't near as bad as it's been in the past 2 years. And we had, and nobody didn't know why. I drove to Central Parish. They had all the water. The reason is they didn't cut the pumps on 2 days in advance this time. They did not cut the pumps on, and that made such a big difference. So now what happens is our water drained off. Now they're pumping on us and it's still draining because there's a place for it to go. This is the first time in probably 5 years that this has happened. I don't know if someone monitored it, but kudos to them. They were a good neighbor. They're a good neighbor. But the point that I want to make, that is the highest scoring project we can get, is get a channel cut in every drop of water in the parish. Mr. Hall, you know that. You live there. Mr. Byforce lives there. These people, you know, they have criteria just like we have criteria, but they are the part of grading. If I understand correctly, y'all the second team to be grading, right? The first team, or y'all the first team or the second team?
There's been one team of folks from the 5 agencies looking at all the different aspects of it in scoring.
Okay.
Is that project that you're talking about, was it submitted as a round one project?
Was not submitted, and this is what I'm gonna tell you. Y'all committees got put together real quick, and she was correct about the COVID. We were shut down also. So all these committees got put together, but you still have to do the first round out. You know, the governor wants to see action, and I thought that was good on the governor's part. But what has happened is the only ones that were organized at that time was the drainage districts or whatever, and they got a few projects out, but the parishes didn't. Even Ascension didn't get in it, but they did get the state project that was in the hole before, and that's what we call Gap 22, where they're gonna raise the road up and add some pumping.
To be clear, we got over 400 projects submitted.
From Livingston Parish?
For round one, no. for
No,
those
I'm
two
talking about
months.
Livingston Parish. I'm talking about Livingston Parish. So out of those 400, how many from Livingston Parish?
I could probably answer that. Looked at it on the internet, I was trying to find it earlier, but the $15 million
Come up here,
project.
Shane, come up here.
Let me double check this, it's on the internet, but, the $15 million project that was funded, I think that's probably some of the 30% that you were referring to. I just wanna say I appreciate y'all very, very, very much and all the things y'all do to get us that money to improve drainage in Livingston Parish, but, that was, to my understanding, there were some identified canals and tributaries, creeks, whatever, you wanna call them. A list was generated, and they're gonna go in there, that money's gonna be used to go in there and clean the debris so that out of those canals, there's a map, it's all on the internet, you can look it up yourself, to allow that to drain better, so that, you know, they drain per their design. What I don't think it's for, and maybe you could correct me if I'm wrong, is I don't think it's actually to get a piece of equipment down in there to actually dig out those canals such that, you know, that type of stuff. I think it's just simply to clean out the debris, which is gonna help, because they've done that in my area, like Little Natal, Benny, not with Watershed money, but other government funding.
Was
and,
that the 42
and
million?
it really did help, you know.
Is that the
so-
42 million?
that's the $15 million. The $42 million project, and that's the Highway 22 bridge raising project, right, Randy? I mean, I guess there's an argument there whether or not that's gonna help or not. The way it was communicated to me, that it's gonna benefit the people of Livingston Parish, right? It's gonna improve drainage along the Amy River, right? And so I guess maybe there's some that may sacrifice and you know, have a negative impact. I'm not quite sure. I think that's a very valid request that you have to maybe get a copy of that study that was performed, you know, but it was communicated to us that, you know, the engineers that worked for our parish president, you know, had looked at that, and that they had agreed that, you know, was not gonna have a negative impact. It was actually gonna be some improvements to the drainage of Livingston Parish, you know, so, and all the things that Randy talked about earlier, you know, as far as, stipulations about dropping the lawsuit and stuff like that, you know, that's all part of that deal, so, anyway, that being said, go ahead,
I
Mr.
can
Pat.
add a little bit of detail to a couple of these things.
Go ahead, man, come on,
Okay,
appreciate
sure.
you.
The 15 million, that got started as a project that the parish applied for
Yeah.
with Natural Resource Conservation Service and the
Yeah.
USDA. And USDA paid to do a bunch of that, but not the whole parish. So that's when the parish said, well, you know, we really need to do the whole shebang, and so we need another $15 million because all the NRCS money is gone. So it's really a continuation of another federally funded project to make sure the whole parish is covered.
And it does come with big improvements. To answer that question earlier, the 3 projects that Livingston Parish, there was many projects submitted for Livingston Parish through the funded gravity drainage districts that a large portion of us, you know, we live in an unfunded gravity drainage district, and we relied on the parish. Mr. Mark Carroll worked very hard to submit some projects. The project that he just referred to, the $15 million project to complete that work, and that was one that was submitted by Livingston Parish. The other one, there was some mitigation to elevate houses. I'm not quite sure if that got funded yet. I mean, that maybe be round 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 or something. I'm not quite sure exactly how that's working out, but I think that was maybe another project. And then, to the best of my knowledge, the other project was the Weir that was submitted. Now, maybe it's not getting funded through the Watershed. Maybe that's getting funded through another project, but that one was submitted.
My understanding on the Weir was that it was federal, like a direct through the Corps.
Yeah,
It's
maybe
not
so.
part of this.
Maybe so.
It's got initials, and I forget the initials. One thing I want to give credit, made the 15 million. First we had the 42 million, then the 15 million. The 15 million got done with Mark Harrell and President Layton Ricks actually going to the governor's office and asking for some special help. So they do get credit for that 15 million. We have a map where they was gonna go, and I'm proud to say a lot of it's gonna be in District 8, the district I represent, so I'm proud of that part of it. But it's on both sides of the interstate, so, but as I said before, you gotta start to the bottom and work your way up, and that's why it's gotta come there. But again, the point that I was trying to make, I don't know if this organization, and I know y'all get discouraged, and I see the point why. I'm gonna say this, I met with the past president this week, and he says that he's on top of the things, and his two people he has, Mark Howell and Mr. Steve Kistler, and he feels like they end up doing what they need to do for the next round. I don't know, when we originally started this committee, guys, there was a lot of confusion probably on my part. I thought that's where we had to go, to the Watershed Committee. Maybe it's not what we got to do. Maybe we have to look at the parish and let administration with their expertise or whatever, let them decide where the grants is at. I still think there's a valuable place for this committee, because this is where we had the ideas, where we come up with, and the feedback. And I like what Shane said earlier about, let's get a list together, let's submit it to the council. Maybe they won't do anything, or let's submit it to the parish president. Parish president told me that he's willing to meet with anybody on this committee at any time. He would rather do it one-on-one, and so I'm gonna relay, that's what he told me, you know. And he thanks y'all for a great job that's been done. He said he knows you volunteering your time. He says he knows that y'all qualified and y'all got the same thing that he wants, and that's a flood improvement. And I'm quoting him verbatim on what he said. He also said that some of this stuff that they're working on, they get the last minute details and they gotta rush and get this in to meet deadlines, you know. And I don't know what the future is or whatever, but just the start of y'all being here, got these people here. Just being televised, you know how many people's watching this meeting, you can watch and look at it, you know. And the word is getting around, and the word knows, you know. I fight hard for the parish just like every elected official does for this parish, the same way. We had over 60 calls in that rain that I just talked about in that 48 hours, and all of them, their roads was underwater, and they was all concerned about their houses gonna be underwater. And we didn't get it because of good decision by Central Parish. She was, for the first time, not to pump in advance of a rain. They could pump during the rain, that lets everybody's water go out then. But if you pump before the rain, what that does is we already flooded, and then you got the rain there, and it's just, gravity is not gonna, drainage is not gonna beat pump force drainage. It's not gonna happen.
You know, the Highway 22 project running the water to Mackerlaw Swamp, do you know where it goes after that?
Us.
In the lake.
Us. In the lake.
It goes in the lake. The Watershed people know that, and for the water to get in Lake Marpaw, they either have to go through the Avett River, the Tickfaw River, or Blind River. That's the last ones that go into there. They blocked up, so it can't get out. The canal out to the path, the path out to path Manchac is blocked up.
And that's what I'm saying, this would probably be, the parishes affected, St. James has got part of that, you know, Central Parish, Livingston Parish, East Baton Rouge, all these parishes are affected. I don't see a more worthy project than to get it.
And also around the Ascension Parish, the water in Ascension Parish is trying to go to the Mississippi River.
I know.
They built levees to stop it from going to the,
I know.
they had the big flood, everybody saw that. The water was trying to go to the Mississippi River.
I know.
But it wound up on us over there.
Mississippi River
And
cut.
they're pumping it, they pump up Blind River, and they pump in Diversion Canal.
So now, again, like I said earlier, and they heard me, I'm gonna repeat myself, there's two things we have to fight, y'all. We have to get the rainwater off of us, but we're also now we're gonna have a tidewater problem because they got permitted to build levees through the Mackerel Swamp. So that's gonna act like a funnel, you know. St. John's done got theirs, St. James is working on theirs. It's gonna be like a funnel coming down and it's gonna spread out on us. So anyway, again, I appreciate y'all coming here. I know what y'all do, and thank y'all for doing it.
Randy,
You
how
got
do we
something?
make sure that Ascension Parish doesn't pump on us again? Because that lawsuit, it sounds like was eliminated. Sounds like that'd be a good lawsuit. They shouldn't be pumping on us in Port Rain. How do we make sure that happens
I
again?
wanna
But
give
also,
credit-
I might have heard wrong with something, but I kept hearing the Highway 22 project is good if the Comey Diversion project goes through. So how do we make sure that that's not done before the Comey project? And
The
I
language-
also heard Livingston Parish,
Yeah.
lower Livingston is what keeps flooding.
Yeah.
And if you open up 60% of north of Livingston Parish, that's the majority of Livingston Parish, but it doesn't help the south any. And that's what we've been fighting about the whole time. Starting from the bottom, going to the top. It sounds like we're just gonna keep going where we've been with status quo.
Okay, this is my opinion, the way I heard it, okay? First thing I wanna do is give the legal department and the past president credit for the way they did negotiate the suit. I voted no. I voted that we shouldn't remove the suit. But they did do a good job in negotiating a settlement that if they did remove the suit and allow that to happen, it couldn't have any adverse effect on us. And the only way that could happen, no adverse effect on us, is that the commit diversion project has to be completed. Because there was gonna be a minimum adverse effect. They said 4 inches, we were saying 8 inches, our engineers.
I applaud that, but you can still help 60% of the north side and hurt 40% of the south side. It still qualifies as helping Livingston Parish.
I also want to give Congressman Graves, he called me personally, I talked to him. He is at top of it as much as he can. He's a elected official, he can bring the money, he can't dictate where the money goes. But he's well aware because I was upset about bringing the fresh water in from the Mississippi River back to the lake. I was upset about that. And my being was, we already a mud bowl there, you know, why you gonna put more water? I said, he said, okay, the fresh water is gonna go ahead and make the trees better, make the swamp come alive. He said, we're gonna get mitigation points for this, and this is gonna allow us to do other things flood-wise. I don't know all the rules like these guys, but I can tell you what somebody tells me. So, having said that, I said, well, why don't we just put pumps in the same canal? You know, it seemed if you got a permit to pump water, to bring water in, you should have a permit to pump it back out, you know? And that wasn't funded to have pumps and put in those canals. But he said he would work on that. He would work to make sure, he wanted to make sure that the things that happen, flooding people out, is what obviously he probably's got ambitions to be a better public service leader than he is, or a higher office, I don't know. But I've never seen a harder working man in my life, and I say that quote all the time. He's at every meeting, no matter how much, you know, feedback he gets, and some of it ain't positive, you know, and they beat him up on all kinds of things, but he takes the heat and he goes out there and does it. I'm proud he's my congressman, tell you that. I just don't.
I don't mean to cut you off. I applaud their work, but how do we make sure Ascension doesn't pump again? How do we make sure Ascension does what they did a couple days ago?
Let me tell you what's our state legislative delegate, and you know what, delegation, you know why I believe that? They the one that got Ascension in the Pontchartrain Basin. Those same people that represent Ascension represent Livingston. Glacier Snyder represents both parishes. What's the senator's name? Just lost his name. He represents both parishes. He's the one that signed the letter. I got a copy of asking the governor to put the 22 on fast track. Not Diaz. But anyway, there's 5 of them signed it. Johnny Burflight signed it. All those people that signed that letter, or got those people to pass a bill to put them into the Pontchartrain Basin, they need to author a bill to put Livingston in that Pontchartrain Basin. And we have so much more access. You see, that's why they get permits. That's why they can dredge. You know, they in that Pontchartrain Basin. Pontchartrain Basin has a lot more pull than Livingston Parish by itself. When they talk as a committee, as a group, people seem to listen.
I might have missed it. I still don't know who made the decision not to pump water on us
Well,
before the rain.
ultimately, that's
Who's gonna call them before and ask them not to do it again.
Ultimately, that's the parish president in a sense that probably made the decision, but he may have a criteria. I'm not aware of that. The water may have to be a certain height before he can pump. You know, I don't know those things. I really don't. But I'm assuming the Pontchartrain Basin has got a permit to allow them to do that. And they probably got a certain set of rules they got to abide by, and maybe nobody was watching it because of this committee being here talking about this almost every month. The same thing over and over. It's the first time it happened, you know.
I noticed it. I noticed it this morning.
I have a
Yes, ma'am, Ms.
question.
Pat.
How do you become a member to be put in the Pontchartrain Basin? Is there a way
State
to lobby or
they
to
passed the
letter?
bill, yeah, the state legislators passed the bill, put them in there.
Well, who would we approach
The
to?
same ones that represent Central Parish, represent Livingston
Okay.
Parish. Now, you have some additional members, you know, but I'm gonna say this, for instance, Buddy Mincy is your representative.
Right.
He wasn't elected when they put them in that Pontchartrain district, but his co-person probably voted, you know, just like the other people did, you know.
So he would be one that we could contact to.
Yeah, see, that couldn't happen this year because you got a certain amount of bills each one can author, and they already through there. You know, I know Sherman's probably maxed out.
For next session.
And this is kind of the first I'm hearing about this, is good stuff, but it's maybe we look into it over the next year. You know, you pass a resolution by the parish council, we get some, maybe the parish president, and there's on the board, and then you kind of use that as a unified effort that this is a good thing and that this needs to happen, instead of just maybe one person.
He's upset he can't hear you.
Come on, Mike.
Okay, so the question, what thing you gonna say? I didn't take over, right? I just wanted to try to help communicate what I feel is a good way to maybe implement that or to make that change. And to me, that would be, it's too late for this session. I mean, so all the bills have been submitted, they're voting on them and all this kind of stuff, you know. But next session, you know, it's possible that we could get a representative or a senator to maybe support some type of bill, you know, to transfer us into that Pontchartrain Basin. I think that maybe that's something y'all could work on and the council could work on and the administration or the parish could work on to determine if that's actually a good thing, right? I mean, it sounds good, you know, but let's kind of look into it a little bit deeper, find out if that's actually a good thing, you know, the pros and cons, and then maybe pass a resolution by the council and maybe some others and get everybody on board in a unified effort and say, hey, everybody wants this to happen. What doesn't work is if you got this group, that group, and this group, and this group, and they're all working against each other, and you get a representative or senator up there trying to support a bill, and then he's getting phone calls that no, Livingston Parish people don't want to do this, then it's going to be dead, and it's not going to happen, and all that good stuff. So I think we need to try to work to unify that effort if we feel like that's a good thing. I appreciate you bringing that up. I don't know how much further the meeting's going to last. You know, I'll stay to the end or even after that to communicate. But I just kind of want to say one more thing. Don't get discouraged. Don't give up. I think that you can work together to bring positive outcomes when it comes to drainage improvement projects in Livingston Parish. One of the ways you can do that is, you know, we just formed Gravity Drainage District 8. We talked about it earlier because it's 80% of Livingston Parish, you know. We're going to be looking at a funding mechanism. We're going to be establishing meeting times, right? And so Randy's going to be a board member. I'm a board member. Currently, Jeff Ard and you know, Mr. McMorris is going to be board member. We're going to be getting one more board member, you know. But you could help us fund this district, right? You help us fund this district. We're certainly willing to work with you, listen to your ideas, to I guess you would say work towards drainage improvement projects, you know, your ideas, the whole 9 yards, and we'll work with the administration and you all and other gravity drainage districts in Livingston Parish to implement, you know, drainage improvement projects for the entire Livingston Parish, you know. So I think that's another way of working the system, you know. I really do. So it's going to take some time, right? I mean, you can't do all this in a day, right? But I think there is time. You know, this watershed funding stuff is probably going to be maybe a 10-year deal, you know, I mean, this ain't something that's gonna happen all next year, you know what I mean? So we work together as a group, you know, we fund this district, we get us some authority to make decisions, you know, to improve drainage in Livingston Parish, maybe form some type of super board of the gravity drainage district, you know, chairs, you know, to maybe push for that type of stuff, you know, in a unified effort, and I think that's a good thing. But I do like that idea of, another thing is to, like Randy was talking about this project, and then you were talking about another project, you know, come up with a way to identify the important drainage improvement projects, develop that list of what you really want to happen, and prioritize it, and then, you know, if the entire community of Livingston Parish, or majority of the entire community of Livingston Parish is for it, then it's gonna be easy to get elected officials to help us get this passed and get the funding for it and all this wonderful, beautiful stuff, so.
Mr. Sibley.
Thank you. I want to get something straight with me. Actually, you and Ernie was talking about it. So, did I understand you say, you're telling about the levels of the lake and stuff, and that if we could dredge the lake, get it to North Pat, that's
Just a
our
challenge.
plug. That's the plug there. And then you said that, well, we know that can't happen. Is that correct? Did I understand that? And I wonder why.
I probably was talking about two different things. When I was talking about shell dredging, that was my thought process. In the past, when we shell dredged, we quit in 1983, y'all. When we quit shell dredging in '83, we had no flood problems. You know, we didn't have that. And we had piles of shells where they got now homes at. And that was a commerce, and I'm sure the gravel pits wouldn't want to see that come back. But the house that I built in 1979 has a shell foundation, because that was a cheap product, you know.
So really, until we take care of this, the 15 million for the 145 miles of laterals and.
15 million, you cannot remove vegetation.
Oh, no, I know that's allocated for that project. Whatever it's gonna cost to do that, all we're gonna do is put water down there, and it's going nowhere.
But let me explain, about that 15 million, I think I'm getting almost 5 or 6 of it. And I can't remove any vegetation or put any spalls on the bank. But anything I can go, they do have machines that allow you to grind up, and if it floats away in the water, that's considered water. So there's all kind of ways, but and I shouldn't be saying this because they make those inspections and those audits, you know. But how much benefit you get from the 15 million is nothing or nil. You know, you're not gonna keep anybody from flooding. You may be able to get the water moving towards the lake a little bit, but the flood water we get is backup water, you know, backup water. So it can't get out.
I'm thinking that would be a worthy project, or something really.
If I could jump in here, I said earlier that you guys are actually the lucky in that we funded an A.B. River model before we started all the other modeling efforts. Everybody else in the state is going to be probably 18 months to a couple of years from now having their model. There is an A.B. River Basin model already. We are also working on, with CPRA, transition zone model, which is going to have a big impact on Livingston Parish, because if y'all are the definition of transition zone, because it's got flooding from riverine, rain, and also from the lake picking up, from the tropical event. So we should be able to model that. I will tell you, they modeled dredging out the mouth of the river out into the lake, and it had almost no effect on flooding.
I can understand that.
The important thing now will be for us, if we can get these transition zone models in, they'll be able to run different scenarios about how high the lake is and how much rain you get and where the flooding occurs and all that. Which is why it is, this first round of projects, we haven't really gotten into this, but if I may, I'll spend a couple of minutes talking about round one projects and how that goes. That's the $100 million that's going $60 million for the highest scoring projects, and then $40 million, $5 million to each region. those by definition have to be projects that don't need a lot of modeling, that don't necessarily need us to know whether that would be a good idea to go dredge Lake Marhol to get the water out. But we're gonna have better models, we're gonna have bigger regional models, and this transition zone modeling, which should allow us to do things like that. That's why HUD and Congress put this, they said 12 years, we're planning on doing it at 10. 12-year time span on this grant is because they want us to make sure that we all are working together to do only the smart things and not waste money and not do projects that don't benefit each other, or potentially hurt each other. So I think it's important to recognize that while I'm not a modeler, I can't speak to the benefits or lack of benefits of dredging Lake Marpole out. I do know that they ran a sort of model run with that and didn't really get that benefits. That doesn't mean that more information and more data may not change that, but that's what we have so far.
They run the model almost up to the old lighthouse. Well, the old lighthouse, we consider still Blonde River. We don't even consider that the lake, and that's how far they went. You have to go all the way to the North Pass and do a channel. But I'm gonna sit down, I won't come here no more, up here unless you ask a question. But the thing I wanna make clear, I think the advice or my complaints that y'all were hearing, I made public to y'all, were that we need to get involved. This committee needs to get involved in this watershed money. I now don't believe that way, guys. I believe that we have another purpose if y'all want to stay. That purpose is like Shane just spoke about earlier. I really believe Mark Howell and the past president, Steve Kistler, is on top of the procedures, the red tape, if you want to call it that way, the government. Because I think they changed, you know, and it's a way to do things that sometimes you can't have a meeting to decide to do those things. And I like to still see y'all do whatever you feel is right, but I'm telling you that I believe the past president's on top of this with this, and I think we ought to get out of the watershed initiative. That's my, it's just too much stuff. He knows what he's talking about when he asks about the bank, okay? Because it makes a difference which bank buys where, and if it's gonna be competitive, or if the bank already has that contract. That's, you limit it to what you're gonna be able to do. And he's talking about a mitigation bank, not a bank where you go get a home loan, a mortgage loan. So it's that's why the Weir River project hasn't been done yet too. There's an argument over the route of the Weir River. And that
Blind River is the problem.
Yeah, I know.
Did y'all do a study on Blind River running into Lake Marpole?
I don't know. It may be that they did.
If you go down Blind River to where it runs into the lake, there are wading birds walking out 300 yards from the bank on either side. There's one little narrow thing, it's like a delta. You know what a delta is? Whenever muddy water hits shallow water, it builds up a big mud pile. And it's like a delta. That's what the problem is, because most of the water from Amen River during that big flood, most of the water went straight down Diversion Canal. It was like Colorado Rapids. A lot of water didn't go to the lower Amen out by Keegan. It took 2 or 3 days for the water to come up there in the 2016 flood. Most of the water came down the Diversion Canal, directly in the Blind River, and had Blind River running both ways, back to the airline, out to the lake. The water piles up, there's junk, there's refrigerators, TVs, everything. Tugboat passed through there not long ago and got stuck out by the mouth of the lake. You should have saw all the garbage that came up. It's stuck in the mud.
And they needed that tugboat.
It made a levee out there, and the water, when that water hits it, it flows down, and it piles up more and more mud.
And that's why I said earlier, it's like a dam. They needed a tugboat to finish the state project on Highway 22 by the Front Summit Bridge. Couldn't get the boat down there. I had one more thought. I was gonna say, those projects, they call it reclaiming property, the salt bank. That's not money coming out of the watershed initiative. That's already been to do the mile. Well, what Ernie's saying and I'm saying, that's not enough. You're still gonna have to do more because the lake is still gonna be up here. You're gonna have the mouth cleaned down here. It's gonna continue doing what it's doing. So those projects are I think it's the horizon.
They do need the co-meet diversion is gonna help the northern part of the parish, and it's gonna help us too, because it's gonna stop some of the water coming down there. But you need that, you can do the co-meet river project first. That'll stop a lot of the water from coming on us, that passes by y'all. And that's what's gonna save the northern part. But somebody needs to go down there and actually look at the mouth of Tickfaw, Amid, and Blind River. And Blind River is worse. It's nothing but a big, there's grass growing out all over the place. I've seen that out there. I'm 72 years old, and I used to swim out there and fish along the bank. You can't even get to the bank now, it's mud.
One last thing that I wanted
Yes,
to
ma'am.
add, and that is such an interesting experience. I'm used to doing a lot of coastal work, and it's usually the opposite. Usually people say, I used to play soccer in a field that was here and now it's gone. No, I was just saying it's interesting hearing your experience of the land changing over time. Usually in coastal areas, it's different.
See, y'all can look
Yes.
at, anybody can look, you can look at a map and try to figure out what's going on. It's just like building a highway, but you don't know there's a mountain, and a river, and a swamp, and everything else out there. And that's where the problem is for us.
Yeah.
Water does not go out.
Yeah.
And see, there was a weir, Amen River goes straight, if y'all look at it on your map, Amen River goes and makes a big turn. Diversion Canal that was built to help drain some of the Amen River, there was a wall built there. My father told me back 50 years ago that somebody blew it up, they blew it up with dynamite because they wanted the water to go down the Diversion Canal and Blind River and that swamp over there. There's nothing but big rocks, but the water goes straight now. When you get a big current coming down Amen River, it goes straight in the Virgin Canal. It doesn't go in the lower Amen. The lower Amen is done out.
And this is exactly why I led off by saying I'm not a resident of Livingston. Clearly, you know more about this parish than I could probably ever know. So we always look to y'all as the locals to be able to inform this effort, and that's why I wanted to make this quick announcement I meant to make earlier. We have a couple of meetings coming up. Certainly the provisional governance recommendation. Any other conversations, feel free to reach out. I'm going to work with Angie up here to be able to make sure that I have email addresses for y'all as well. But we do have on May 19th, specifically for our municipal folks, staffers, elected officials, we're going to have a municipal workshop, which is specifically around that provisional governance recommendation and getting feedback and input. Anybody across the region is welcome, really focused on municipalities again. We also have a community workshop. That is literally anybody who lives, works, plays within the region can show up to that, be able to provide input. That's May 20th from 5:30 to 7 o'clock, so it's in the evening hours. We receive feedback from folks who say, I work a 9-to-5 job, it's hard for me to show up. So we try to respond to that feedback that we got. And then our steering committee meeting is also on May 25th, and that is from 1 until 3:30. So we can make sure that y'all get that information. If you're interested, I can put you on our listserv so that you can get every single update that we send out to the larger group. Thank y'all again for your time today and for inviting us. It's really a privilege.
Any other new business, anyone? Any other business?
I make a motion to adjourn.
We have a motion from Mr. House to adjourn.
Second.
Second by Mr. Morris.
Adjourn.